Here's something that we know. We know that the Celtics have been dominant this season. We know that they are the favorites to win the NBA title. They've built an unbelievable team through awesome trades. They have great defense, a great starting five and closing five, a fantastic team overall. But there's one thing we don't know. One thing that could hold them back and cost them a run to the title this season. Okay, obviously one is injuries, especially with an injury-prone Kristaps Porzingis, but the other is that no team in the history of the league has ever relied on three-point shooting more than the Celtics, and the variance that comes along with that could lose them a title. It's easy to see a path where the Celtics lose to a team that they shouldn't in the postseason simply because they aren't making shots. This season, they are number one in threes made. They are number one in threes attempted. They are fourth in three-point percentage. In wins, they shoot over 40% from three on 42 attempts per game. In losses, they shoot 31% from three on the same number of attempts. To beat the Celtics, they have to miss threes. That's the case with this year's Celtics, and we saw it with last year's Celtics as well. In losses in the playoffs last year, they shot 32% from three, and in wins, they shot nearly 42%. This team relies on the three, and if they make them, it is very difficult to beat them, and if they miss them, they are a beatable team. Now, when I said earlier that no team in the history of the league has ever relied on three-point shooting the way that the Celtics have, a lot of you probably thought, hey Tucker, what about the James Harden Houston Rockets? They were the analytics heavy team. They were the team that shot all these threes. They were the team that lost in the playoffs because of the variance that you're talking about. And yeah, that's an awesome comparison. I'm glad you thought of that. The peak Harden Rockets, over 50% of their shot attempts in the regular season that year were three-point attempts. This year for the Celtics, that number's right around 47%. The difference between the two is the Rockets got less field goal attempts up per game because they got to the free throw line more, and obviously if you're fouled on a shot, it doesn't count as an attempt. And so overall, they're about equal. Those are the two most high variance, most heavily relying upon the three teams that we have seen ever in the history of the league, and we saw exactly what variance did to the James Harden Rockets, the best team that they had. Yes, they had to play against some really good Warriors teams. Yes, they had some bad luck in terms of who they had to play against, but the reason that they lost, the reason they didn't win the series was because they simply didn't make enough threes. That team was so good that they could have beaten even those great Warriors teams if they had just made some more shots, and that is the best historical comparison for the Celtics this season. At their peak, they can beat anyone in the league, and if they're missing shots, not so much. And generally speaking, relying on three-point shooting isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing in itself, but it does introduce a ton of variance. However, these Celtics are different from those Rockets in a very, very distinct way. Houston offensively had two options. They give it to James Harden, he runs a pick and roll and he creates, or they give it to Chris Paul and he runs a pick and roll and he creates. Those were their two offensive options, and they were extremely potent offensive options. But in every single scenario, it resulted in either a perimeter guy driving to the rim or a kick out for a perimeter player in an open three. That was it. They had no other options. That's why they missed as many threes as they did in a row, because that was their offense. They didn't have anything else to go to. But the Celtics have something else to go to, and it goes back to a trade that they made in the offseason for Kristaps Porzingis. And if the Celtics do end up being successful in the postseason, even in games in which they don't shoot well from three, Kristaps Porzingis, if healthy, will be the reason. He gives them another weapon. He gives them another option, and that's the reason that they traded for him. Yes, he provides floor spacing. Yes, he works really well defensively in their system, but he also gives them an option that isn't Jason Tatum in isolation, it isn't Jaylen Brown driving to the rim, it isn't kicking out for a three-point shot. Kristaps Porzingis has been awesome in the post this year and was awesome in the post last year in Washington, and that's why Boston traded for him. He's destroying teams in the post, especially on switches, and a lot of teams are switching against the Celtics right now because they don't want to give up all these open threes, and that gives them a front court option that the Rockets didn't have and last year's Celtics just didn't have. If Jason Tatum is having an off game, if Jaylen Brown's turning the ball over, if they're not making shots, they can go to Kristaps Porzingis for consistent at the rim offense, in addition to providing a tremendous mismatch advantage, whether it be on a switch or otherwise. And that's the difference for Boston. Yes, they rely a ton on threes, but they do have other options, and it doesn't just include perimeter players, but it includes a front court player as well, which is why I'm confident in saying that as of right now, if Boston goes into the postseason fully healthy, I think they're absolutely the favorite to win the title. And if they make shots, if Boston shoots between 37 and 40% from three, they're winning the NBA title. Their starting five is too good. They're too good defensively. They have too much talent. If they make shots, they will win the title. That's just how it works for them right now. They are that dominant. I think people are underestimating just how dominant they are. But even if they don't make shots, at least they have another option in Kristaps Porzingis. And it might seem like an oversimplification. It might seem like I'm just making that statement as a way to be hyperbolic. I'm not. Boston's starting five is a group that never should have been able to be put together. They already had Jaylen Brown. They already had Jason Tatum. They were able to bring in Derek White a few seasons ago. Kristaps Porzingis has been perfect for them. And then Drew Holiday just fell in their lap. You're not supposed to be able to put together a group of 5 players that legitimately, on different teams in different situations, all 5 of them could possibly make an all-star team. They wouldn't make an all-star team, but it would be at least within the realm of possibility. You're not supposed to be able to put together this kind of group and have a decent bench as well. And from a roster perspective, Boston has an advantage over every single other team in the league. That doesn't mean that they're going to win the title. It doesn't mean that they're going to go into the postseason fully healthy. That was one of the risks of the Porzingis trade in the first place. But it does mean that if they play the way that they play, if they play at their best, if they're making shots, nobody else can beat them. Now, having said that, I think you also could have said that for almost any team that the Rockets played against. The Rockets could have beaten almost any team at their peak. The only team they couldn't, obviously, was the Warriors, and we saw exactly what variance did to them in the postseason. And we know that three-point shooting is more difficult in the postseason. We know that teams are locked in more defensively. We know that you have to post up a little bit more in the postseason, get to the rim a little bit more, get to the free throw line more. They absolutely need to be more aggressive in terms of getting to the rim, and I'd imagine their shot profile will change a little bit in the postseason this year, the way that it changed a little bit in the postseason last year. But with the way the Celtics have constructed their roster, I don't want to oversimplify the rest of the season. I don't want to make the rest of the season sound like it doesn't matter. But if Boston is making shots and they are healthy, they will probably win the title. They certainly will make the finals. And by the way, I really desperately hope that this team is fully healthy as well in the postseason, because I want to see if I'm right. This is where I'm at right now, and I feel like they are the best team. I feel like when healthy and making shots, that's the team that's going to win the title. And I want to know if I'm right. I hope we don't go into the postseason and KP's missing games, or there's like an ankle injury or something for Tatum. I really, really hope we get to see this and every other team at full strength, because this postseason run is setting up to be an all-timer. The Western Conference is absolutely loaded. We've got all kinds of question marks in the East, but all the teams are extremely talented. We've got young and up-and-coming teams like the Thunder. We've got Minnesota kind of coming out of nowhere. There are so many teams to keep an eye on here, and I don't want this video to seem like, oh, well, Boston's just 100% going to win the title no matter what. There's still so much stuff that can happen, but I feel like as you're evaluating the teams that possibly could contend, that could actually win the title, Boston has the best chance, and they also have the most interesting play style and shot selection that could potentially lead them to not being successful. In addition to, obviously, guys like Tatum and Brown, these guys have to measure up against some of the other stars around the league. And like I said, I cannot wait to see this one.